The quality of care and compassion can really impact the parts of the brain and the parts of the nervous system that continue to energize our fear systems, our sympathetic fight or flight systems, and also our dorsal shutdown and disconnect system. One of the main ways that we can build an alternative neural network is by actively working on developing the qualities of compassion and kindness, in particular to ourselves. In the decades that I've worked with trauma survivors, I have found the vast majority of the folks that I work with to be kind, compassionate, caring, concerned about others. And the vast majority of folks that I've worked with, and even students I've taught, have a harder time offering a molecule or a tablespoonful of that kindness and compassion towards themselves that they can readily offer to colleagues, friends, coworkers, families, strangers. I've often said that if you listen to how you speak to yourself in shame, you would quickly become aware that you would probably not ever speak to another person as harshly and as hatefully and as judgmentally as you do with yourself. And the more that we're in shame and the more that we're in anger and against ourselves, the more that feeds that state. And so the way to break that, the way to create an alternative neurological network is by intentionally developing and cultivating the ability to feel compassion, tenderness, kindness, friendliness towards ourselves. This isn't about trying to love ourselves romantically or idealize ourselves. It's more about generating a quality of heart caring, much like you do already when, if you have a beloved pet or beloved person in your life, it's easy for you to feel that heart caring with people. When you're in shame, that heart caring gets cut off. You cannot care about yourself, and you do not believe in that moment that anyone else might really care about you. So compassion is the antidote. But one of the things that will get in the way for many people about beginning to cultivate and apply the antidote is that in shame itself, there is a belief that we deserve the shame. I messed up. I made a mistake. I'm a bad person. This happened in my past. I did this or I didn't do that, and therefore it's unforgivable. So we could give intellectual voice to, I really want to feel better. I want to like myself. But be aware of how and what happens when you try to approach working on self-compassion. As much as we hate shame, our culture tells us we should listen to shame. How else can I be a good person if I don't drive myself nuts with telling people how bad I am until I can become a better person? Shame will drive me to be on time or to be more thoughtful or to remember to do things more often. That's what society tells us. That's what a lot of people tell us. But the truth is that shame does us nothing in its general way that we experience it. It actually, for the most part, shuts us down, gives us a message about the past. But then as long as we're in shame, we're living out a story that's not present. It's a story that we've created from our past. We keep projecting it into the future. And as we live in that story of shame, it limits what we think is possible for us. It limits the kind of love we think we can get, the kind of relationships, the kind of job, the places we can live, how much money we could earn, or what we do with money, what we do in relationships. It limits. The more shame you have, the more conflicts you may have around your own personal power. Shame is a survival response. When you're in a family or in a situation where there is violence with the potential for eruption and danger to yourself or to others, shame is one of the most powerful reactions your nervous system can muster to shut you down. So say you lived in a family where there was alcoholism. And by the way, I know I'm using a lot of family examples with this. It's a little bit easier to translate. There's lots of different ways to have trauma, natural disasters, racial trauma, environmental trauma, war trauma. There is a piece of shame that's in all of them that can come up and be awakened. But I'm using these examples in family situations to give people a closer to home experience. But if you grew up in a family where there was addiction to substances or alcohol, and people were volatile, they could be explosive, scary, or mean, or violent, then what would happen is, as a parent might be shaming you, there's part of your nervous system that's actually taking that in and taking that on because it will shut you up. It will make it so that you will not feel angry at them. When you're ashamed, you're not so much angry at the other person. You're angry and disgusted and disappointed in yourself. So shame takes my anger at my parent, my other person, my boss, right? And it amplifies it back onto me. It makes me feel angry at and disappointed in me, instead of seeing the other person isn't treating me correctly or with respect or kindly. But in a dysfunctional situation, they're not going to. And so shame will help you avoid more beatings, will help you avoid being found to be the target of an incoming missile, because shame shuts you up, gets you to want to disappear. And that's the opposite in that moment of expressing rage and need and want, which in a lot of situations would actually only make the risk to your personal safety worse. So right now, when shame comes on, it's not about saving our life, but it does come on trying to save us from loss. So a lot of times we feel shame in a background way about a project we're doing or how something might not go well. In other words, with shame, we become more focused on how what we're going to do is fail and show us to be shameful. That's much more likely for us than to hold the hope and the clarity that I'm learning this, I'm making my way through this, and I can do this project or give this talk or have this relationship, and it can be a work in progress. It can become better. I remember reading recently that, you can have the voice of the critic or the voice of the coach. Shame is always the voice of the critic in judgment, always. And one of the ways you can begin to work with it is also, and we'll get more to this with our work on compassion too, but which is coaching yourself, which is instead of being so harshly judgmental about, you didn't get anything done today, to actually see or look at something you did do, or that you did take a nap because you needed that and you were too overwhelmed, your nervous system was too burnt out to do anything else. You can begin to speak to yourself as a coach, just like you begin to talk to yourself out of kindness. One of the ways that we help people imagine this kind and compassionate attitude is to imagine yourself speaking to a distressed child that you care about. We would talk softly, and we might do a reassuring, safe touch to the child and hold them, or speak quietly and give them something to help wipe their tears. But we would be pouring on the care. We would be pouring on the connection. And as we did that, we would be helping extinguish the fires of shame. As we move into the social engagement system, we invite, in this example, the child to begin to leave their shame and to come into contact with you. And the moment they're in contact with you, the isolation that arises from any defensive function, and in particular shame and judgment, The moment I come into contact, my sense of isolation begins to dissolve. Now, the same is true if you come in contact with you. So, when we are able to offer ourselves caring, kind, and compassionate quality, your nervous system settles and you begin to return home to ventral. And out of the activation and the circuity, the circles and cycles that you go through in your head of the stories of your shamefulness or the disappointment in yourself, because here you are again. So, for example, if you could meet that, if I could meet that, say, with that disappointment and say, yeah, that part of me is disappointed because it's afraid that if I don't do everything, I'm not good enough. And that part of me is always going to be worried I'm not good enough. Because that's what shame does. It's not going to be like you take your shame and make it love you. It's actually over time you begin to see that shame is a state. It's a state of profound dysregulation. It's part of what makes healing difficult for people because shame can stand in the way of how much they're allowed to heal. If we were lucky enough to have experiences growing up where our shame was met with love, connection, caring, and reassurance, chances are our shame response won't be so overwhelmingly dysregulated. But most of us didn't get that. So here is where, through our own effort and intention, that we can cultivate this ability, we can grow this ability to offer ourselves grace, to be kind, to be the same way that we would be with any other human we cared about. And to meet our discomfort, to meet our dysregulation with care and compassion. One of the things that makes meeting shame with compassion more challenging than, say, meeting fear or anger or just overwhelm with compassion is somehow we have an easier time identifying those states of anger or fear or overwhelm. Somehow they don't feel quite as personal. We can feel threatened by our own anger, but it doesn't seem to carry the same overall statement about our essence that shame does. Shame is so convincing. Tara Brach has talked about it and labeled it the trance of unworthiness. I love that phrase because shame is so much of a trance that when we're in that psychological, physiological state, everything we're thinking, narrating to ourselves, and believing about our badness, it all feels true and makes perfect sense in that state. So just like noticing when you're dysregulated, I want you to just notice when you're dysregulated with shame.